So today we're talking about learning / teachings and paradigms.
Ooh, paradigms. There you go.
I know this one, I don't know, this one can be superficial or we can go fairly deep with it, but I thought we'd start off by defining what a paradigm is.
Well, there's lots of different ways of describing it. You know, when I was with Bob Proctor, he had a whole diagram to break it all down. But a paradigm is kind of like, I like to use it so people can understand it in a basic format. It's kind of like our bodies and brains are kind of like computers, right? There's certain programming and things that help a computer run efficiently. The same thing for us. So breathing, talking, walking, all those things are programmed within us in our DNA. And a paradigm is more of like an idea or a concept that we've kind of held on to now, and that's kind of part of that, our identity, right? And so when people, as they go through life, some of those paradigms we want to have, and some of those ones we want to change. And so they can affect pretty much every area of your life if you're not aware of what you actually hold on to in those ways of thinking. So that's a kind of like very chunked up explanation because you go very, very deep of what it is and how it all happens. But that's kind of my closing version really quickly.
I get it. Well, it's funny. The other day, a post came up. Well, I had already pulled this topic and then a post came up from Bob Proctor and he was talking about it. And I mean, how do you simplify a definition that can be very complex? And it's kind of like, I compare it, it's a world you create for yourself, like you're saying. And that's going to be based on your beliefs, your values, anything that you have within you that you're projecting out. So you create this world, this little world that you have, and you have these experiences in this world. And, you know, Bob mentioned like that's a reflection and projection of your behaviors and like you're saying your values and your beliefs. And so you create this paradigm, this world that you get to interact with, but you also get to recreate it every day and change it. And so when people talk about shifting paradigms, very kind of synchronously with even parallel lives, where it's the reason with that is that you can change your paradigm based on changing your behaviors, your values, and your beliefs. And so you create a different world that you get to experience. And you can choose that at any given point at any given time, as long as you're shifting your behaviors, your values, and your beliefs. And so I always compare paradigms to, it's your little world. It's what you're interacting with. It's what you get to experience. And it's what you're putting out and you're attracting back. It's a direct reflection of what's going on within you.
Of course. And then people always ask me like, okay, well, I have different paradigms. Like, how do I change them? And Bobby's always telling me there's usually two ways that people will make that conscious decision to change. And one sometimes is a traumatic event, like a near life-death experience, something crazy happens to you, and then boom, like your whole world changes, and that gets you to look at things differently. So that's one way to do it.
Right.
Now, not always the best way. I wouldn't use that as like your.
Well, we have to let's before we realize.
Let's make this really bad, and then maybe I'll get an aha moment. And the other one is through a conscious decision, right? Where I'm like, I'm tired of this, and I want to change it. And Bob used to draw a diagram, and he would have like this circle body because he's like, he goes, if you had to describe the mind, how would you describe it? And most people say, well, it's like the brain. He goes, well, no, that's the brain. It's the mind. So he would draw the stick man to get people to get a visual representation of how the mind works. And then on top of this little like bubble he'd have a line in the middle, and you have your conscious and unconscious mind, and then your physical body. And he would say, in order to change, you know, the unconscious part of your brain, which is where most of the stuff is rooted, those paradigms, is you have to have a repeating idea over and over again that eventually gets accepted as that new idea or that new belief. And so we've done activities where we'd write down like goals or write down things we want to accomplish or acquire, and that is one way of helping your brain start to implant this one idea, rewire it. Sometimes it's physically doing something, right? You can look at fitness as being one. Well, I want to get in better shape. Well, if you've never exercised, that's a wholly new program you're gonna have to run. So you're gonna have to go and do that type of work. In the beginning, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be awkward. Eventually, you start to have this feeling where you feel bad not exercising. It's becoming a part of who you are. Like I have 3 clients right now that they're like, man, when I don't train with you, I'm feeling like fidgety, like I need to be in the gym. And so now you're starting to rewire your brain to make that a part of who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And so those
are their paradigm starts to shift.
Of course. And then I can start applying that in a different way and apply it to their relationships, business, health. I've done it in a variety of different aspects of life to find business partners, relationships, physical, tangible things, locations. But I don't have like an exact, okay, do this today and that's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
It's really going to depend on how long those roots have been sitting in there for you to pluck them out and add new seeds and plant something different.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's deep rooted, right? And so the whole idea behind it is an emotional shift. I think as soon as you start to gain conscious awareness of your belief systems, which are kind of like the laws and the rules, like you're saying, that are deep in your subconscious, once you start to become aware of those, and we talked about that in the last episode and how to start to create awareness, paying attention to them, and deciding if those beliefs still suit who you are and who you want to be, and if not, to start to change them. Once you change those beliefs, then you start to generate different emotions. And I kind of looked at the emotional scale where, you know, shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride are the lower frequencies.
Of course.
And so people often complain about what they're experiencing in life, and basically they're complaining about their paradigm. And so the only way to really shift that is to consciously shift your emotional state. And the minute people start to notice a drastic difference in their paradigms, in their worlds, and what they're experiencing is usually when they get to courage. Because courage has the power to foster action. It has the power to do good, where you're motivated, where you want to go out. Everything's good. Everything's great. Let's get this done. And as soon as you shift into that emotional state, that's when people, I believe, start to really see the paradigm shifts. And like you're saying, it starts to become a lifestyle. And then they start to have different experiences that they start to notice and pay attention to and say, hey, this is different. Different people are coming into my life. I'm getting different job offers. My body's changing in a great way. These are all things that are a result of courage, which then creates that shift. So often people who get stuck, they're usually in these lower frequencies. And so they're constantly feeling that subconsciously and putting it out. And so they're creating their world without realizing that they're in complete control of that creation process.
No, absolutely. And I always like to tell people it's a lonely road too. People are like, this is going to be easy. Actually, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. I remember when I was with Bob, he used to always say, if I could go inside your brain, Chris, and just wash out, because
We
like,
do that to a lot of people.
yeah, like I know where you're wanting to go, but you are just so stuck in your old paradigm and you're not willing to let that go. You need a brainwash, because people used to tell me like, always washing your brain. He goes, well, that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you should need to wash to get out the junk and give yourself a new outlook on life. So I don't really see it as a negative thing. But he goes, but going through this change, it's not going to be easy. And that's where most people kind of miss the mark. They're like, okay, I want to do something. They start doing it. And then external factors come into play where maybe they start self-sabotaging, or they're letting their outside people kind of tell them how to live. I know I went through that personally when I was going through a big change. I was leaving teaching and going into a more entrepreneurial type of business. And a lot of people thought it was crazy. Probably still do. And during that time, Bob used to say to me, he's like, you got to understand like the crab in the bucket mentality, right? Where he goes, I don't know if you know this, when crabs are caught or when they're fish, they'll put crab feed on the bottom.
Right.
They have no top on the lid. So when the crabs go in, they'll all feed. And once they're out of the feed, they'll try to leave. And the moment they leave, the other ones will rip them down and keep them in that old paradigm, is what he used to say to seminars. And so when that happens, you got to be aware of those moments and realize, this is part of the process. I have to kind of keep going. And eventually I'll be able to kind of break through that. And it's sometimes it can happen quickly, and sometimes it may take a while, but again, it always depends on, how hard you're going to hold on to those old beliefs and ideas.
Well, and you mentioned something that kind of ties into the whole learning and teaching part, right? So for me, paradigms are the opportunity to learn and then to teach. So I kind of went through the whole, hierarchy of learning pyramid. And anytime you're in a paradigm, and often people will say, it's groundhog moment, I'm recreating the same thing. I feel the same
people,
same everything, yeah. And and I get it. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there.
Of course.
And for me, that's the thing with paradigms, is that they're there to teach you about those deeper subconscious belief systems that need to be reprogrammed because they no longer suit who you are. Now, if you're not willing to do that work and ask those hard questions and dig deeper within yourself, then you're not actually learning. And in my opinion, learning and teaching, while kind of synonymous, you have to be willing and open to learning before you can teach. And I wrote out the learning pyramid, and it's, we learn 5% when we listen, 10% when we read. You combine listening and reading, that's 20% learning. Demonstration, so when you're demonstrating something, you'll learn at 30%. If you're discussing like we're doing today, that's 50%.
I know.
When you apply those skills, that's 75%. And then when you teach, it's 90%. But in order to get to that place of being able to teach, you have to have taken the opportunity to be open to learning about your surroundings, about your paradigm. What's it telling me? What's it teaching me? And if you can't get to that place where you take it and you see it as a learning experience, you will never be able to shift that paradigm, because you don't see the value, or you don't see the higher meaning of, this isn't just a paradigm. It's called a paradigm for a reason, because it can be changed. It can be switched. It can be shifted. But if you're not learning, you're not going to get to the next level. Like any video game, like you're just going to keep staying in that level, and then you'll complain about it. But again, you have to be willing to do that work, and to get there, you have to be open to learning about it.
No, I agree. And the one thing when I was with Bob, I remember a lot, was me going through a lot of learning in the first beginning, because I was never exposed to the mind in that way, or even thinking about, I didn't even know what paradigm was. Yeah. My background is very like, you don't cry, you show no emotion, you train pro athletes, that's the world, right? And that's what it is. And so for me, my brain in the beginning was, I needed to kind of really get a good grasp of it. So I started reading a lot of books, trying to understand it. And then once you really grasp it, then you can teach it and be able to help other people there. But unless you really learn and apply it yourself and create those results, it's tough for you to get there. And so he used to say to me all the time, like, you would probably not listen to me if I was poor and broke, right? If a homeless guy came up and started talking about the law of attraction, you would think that person's crazy because the result does not match.
Right.
The world that we have right now is the financial for most things. Unfortunately, that's the way the world's going.
It is.
And so you're not going to hold value to what that person is. So Bob was like, taken this information, applied it where I can get tangible results with things that people value. And through that, then it gives me more credibility to teach and talk about these topics.
Right.
And so, yes, if you don't really have a good grasp of it and showing the outside world your results, it's going to be tough for you to then articulate that to somebody else. Right. So it is a process. It's something you're going to have to work on daily. Even me, like, I try my best not to get amped up like I used to be, and it still comes back. Your paradigm sometimes will still kind of creep up on you in different areas, but you catch it and be able to kind of adapt and move forward. And for me, like, usually when I get stressed out or frazzled, I used to be very responsive and just jump. Now I say calm and confident. So there's really nothing that you could say to me that would offend me, that make me upset or get me off my filter to live in that period. And even when I am, though, now, I've been doing this for so long now, I don't let words affect me the same way that other people do, right? And so some people will hold value into things so hardly that it ruins their whole life. Where it's like, why would I entertain that idea when I could just focus on something differently? Right? When things go bad, I just try to find what's the positive thing here, right? What's the good out of this? And I try to focus on that as much as possible. And I don't by any means say I don't acknowledge the negative, like, oh, I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen.
No, you have to.
It's like, okay, well, that sucked. Okay, I can learn from this. What are some positive takeaways? Write a couple things down. Okay, cool. I'd rather focus on that than sit there in my pity.
That's how you shift your paradigm, right? Like, you continue to focus on what is and what you're creating through your thought process, then you're going to get stuck in that paradigm. And I do find that's why I do love coaching, is because in that teaching, I learned so much about myself. And really the only reason I love to coach and to work with people in that capacity is that, yes, you're in a position of teaching, but you're in a greater position of learning if you choose to be. And I always tell people, like, regardless of who you work with, even personal trainers, whatever it is in any world, if they're not being trained themselves, then I would suggest going elsewhere, because it's a learning and teaching process. They're really synchronous together. They need to be held accountable together.
You need to practice what you preach, right? And even me, like, I was around Bob Proctor for quite some time, and people ask him, like, does he read all the time? When he's doing his seminars, like, it's a show, but does he actually do that? And I go, yeah, like, I'm coming there 5, 6 in the morning, he's reading Think, Grow Rich. I'm like, bro, you've read that book 1,000 times, probably millions of times. Like, what? Always a student. You're always something to learn.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, like, man, like, I really should probably adopt some of his beliefs and ways he lives, because, you know, he's done a lot of big things on this planet, and I plan on doing very similar as well. So it's interesting. But yeah, even with fitness, I'm a big fitness guy. I work out really hard. Yesterday I just made a video of me walking upstairs sideways because my legs are really sore. So even me, I lead by example, and, you know, it sets a precedent that, okay, maybe I'll listen to this person in that space because he actually does what he says he's going to do. Right.
Well, that's it. And that's how you shift the paradigm, right? Again, just that conscious awareness of how you're feeling, what you're doing, paying attention to that, going back to journaling it if you need to, and then starting to say, like, you know, is this the world I want to experience? And if it's not, then you have to go inward. You have to change those emotions, get to courage, and have the energy to now start fostering change. And that's when you start to shift your world and you get these different great experiences. Now, you mentioned something about the old paradigm, which is really important too, because it's comfortable. It's certainty.
Of course.
You know, it's going to suck, you know, you're going to feel shitty, but it's certainty. And as humans, change is always hard. So even if the certainty of that old paradigm is horrendous, we may choose that because we need that certainty. We need that predictability versus exploring that unknown. And that's where, again, getting to courage allows you to break that barrier and jump into a new paradigm and create a new paradigm, because you've gotten the energy and the ability to say, hey, I'm ready for change. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm ready to make some moves. So, I mean, it's definitely, I think the whole paradigm teaching and learning, it was cool that that got pulled together, because I think that it all goes together. Your paradigm is really your classroom, and you get to change classrooms, kind of like a hallway with doors. You get to choose what door you go through, and what's on the other side of that door is for you to explore. If you're not consciously aware of your emotions and your beliefs, well, yeah, you're going to keep going through the same door. It'll be familiar, it'll be certainty, but is it really what is going to serve your soul?
No, I agree. Even like with me relocating, like I'm from downtown Toronto or in the Toronto area, and I moved to Sudbury. And when I did, I didn't have any business contacts. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have anything. That's a big different way of thinking from my period to wrap my hand around. Like, am I going to be able to make it happen out there? Am I going to be able to, you know, make a career? And I had all these unknowns. And most people in my situation back in the day would say, I would never do that. That's like crazy to me.
Yeah.
But I know I have a lot of this. So I'm like, if I can apply this stuff and go to a new city, I'm pretty sure I can find a way to make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, well, I just learned something new about myself. So that's how I kind of looked at the situation. Here we are a year and a half later, still here, still doing well. And it just comes from my brain racking around these type of ideas. And most people at the time don't really understand it. I didn't get it. 25 years old, I learned a lot about it and was able to apply it ever since then. And lots of magical things have happened. So very, very powerful lesson, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and I totally get it. I do have like one little quick story about a paradigm shift. So my place of work and where I personally live was my old elementary school. So when I first discovered the place, they changed the school, and I was there for 10 years of my life. And they changed the school into an apartment dwelling and condos. And so I started to rent out places thinking like, this is kind of cool. Like I used to learn here for 10 years. And at the time I was writing a book and it was about shifting your paradigm. And I sat there in my room and I was like, wow, I used to sit in this exact room as a classroom learning. And now here I am writing a book about shifting paradigms in the exact same space, but it's completely different. And I'm learning in a whole different way. Like to me, that was like the manifestation of an actual paradigm shift.
Right.
Where I look out the window, the landscape outside never changed, but yet here I was learning in a completely different capacity. So that was that aha moment of like, okay, so here's the physical reality of a paradigm shift. Now let's apply it everywhere else in my life, which is a work in progress. It's still a learning
experience. Of course.
So,
that's a cool story.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. So, I mean, I hope, people can take some insight from this about paradigms and how they're in control. And really, if you foster and embrace learning and teaching at the highest level, then you will constantly be in control of what you get to experience and you get to shift your paradigms. And it's okay to go back to the old. We all need to sometimes. So I think it's important for people to be forgiving in that shift because it's not easy to explore new territory and not want to go back to the old familiar land.
Of course.
But to be gentle with yourself and know that you are in control of your world and your paradigm. And through teaching and learning, you can constantly shift yourself into different ways of experiencing life.